You are watching Eswatini TV, Sibuko Semaswati.
Good afternoon and a warm welcome to Eswatini TV. My name is Lirato Mabilisa, and as always, I am not alone. I am with my colleague Nogwazi Dlamini. Also joining me in studio are our sign language interpreters Toby Lefagudze and Nompumelelo Hatebe. A very good afternoon, Nogwazi. How are you today?
A very good afternoon, Lerato, and of course a very good afternoon to our viewers, and welcome to Home Study. Lerato, I'm doing very, very well today. How are you doing today?
I am fantastic.
We're hoping you had a very, very lovely sleep last night.
I did, hey?
And ready for some learning today, grade 7s, Form 3s and Form 5s. Speaking of that, Lerato, please could you remind our viewers about today's timetable?
Well, grade 7s, Form 3s and Form 5s, I hope you are ready for today's jam-packed sessions. Firstly, we have religious education from 2 p.m. to 2:30 p.m., followed by science for the Form 3 learners from 2:30 p.m. to 3:08 p.m., followed by religious education from 3:08 p.m. to 3:46 p.m., followed by chemistry from 3:46 p.m. to 4:24 p.m. And then the last subject for today is physics from 4:24 p.m. to 5:02 p.m.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Lerato. And just to remind our viewers back at home that we are live on YouTube and on Facebook. And if you have any questions, please feel free to use our WhatsApp number. And we would love to emphasize this. Please do not call us. Please text us any questions that you might have for that relevant subject. Speaking of subjects, Lerato will be right back with the religious education teacher, Mangoba Mkonda. Will be right back after this.
Labanengi labangenwa ligciwane lecorona bavame kuba netimpawu letingasito letimatima njengebuhlungu bemphimbo, kuphathwa inhloko, kushisa nekubanza, kukhwehlela lokomile, kuphefumula kalukhuni kanye nekudzinwa. Kepha kulabanye kuba matima njengoba leli gciwane lihlasela emaphaphu. Ngesikhathi umtimba ulwa nalo leli gciwane, wakheka emanti lagcwala emaphashini. Emaphaphu-ke angagcwala emanti akuphefumuleki. Lokhu-ke kubanga tingcinamba letinengi. Kuthi kweshisa kulabanye kuyasita ekunciphiseni kwanza kwesifo i-COVID-19. Hlala ekhaya ungahambi. Eswatini sibambisene kulwa nekwanza kweligciwane lecorona.
Ligciwane lecorona
Eswatini sibambisene kulwa nekwanza kuligciwane le-corona.
Welcome back, grade 7s. If you've just tuned in, do not worry. We have not started the lesson and you are right on time. My name is Lirato Mabilisa and I am with the religious education teacher Mangoba Mkonda. Also joining me in studio are our sign language interpreters Tobi Lefagute and Nompumelelo Hadebe. The topic for today, grade 7s, is the 10 plagues. A very good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon, Lirato. Afternoon to the viewer at home. How are you?
I am great. I'm fantastic. So today's topic is the 10 plagues. What would you expect the learner or the viewer at home to have learned by the end of the lesson?
I expect the learner at home to have learned about the events before the 10 plagues, how the 10 plagues occurred and why they occurred.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Without wasting any of your time, you may take the learner through.
Okay, thank you, Lirato. Afternoon, learner at home. I'm Mr. Mkonda. I'll be taking you for religious education. I would like you to have your notebook, pencil, and a ruler, and probably an RSV Bible. If you don't have an RSV Bible, it doesn't matter. Any other Bible you might have. Our today's lesson is the 10 plagues. As you can recall in our previous lesson that we learned about the Sodom and Gomorrah, but I'd like us to go through our objectives for today. Our first objective is to describe the events that led to the 10 plagues. That is number 1. Number 2, list and describe the 10 plagues and their effects. Number 3, describe the characters of God, Pharaoh, Moses, Egyptians, and Israelites. Objective number 1, describe the events that led to the 10 plagues. List and describe the 10 plagues and their effects. Lastly, state the lessons and teachings in the story of the 10 plagues. These are our today's lesson objectives. Moving on, learner at home. You might have prerequisite knowledge or prior knowledge of how man fell into sin. Also the knowledge of how God hates and punishes sin. You remember, learner at home, from the Garden of Eden, destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Keywords. It is important, learner at home, to have and understand the keywords which are going to be used frequently in this lesson. The first one is plague. The second and last is slave. Moving on, let us try to define what a plague is, learner at home. It is generally a disease that spreads quickly and kills a lot of people. A plague. It spreads quickly and kills a lot of people. Learner at home, let us move on. A slave. A person who is the property of another person and is forced to obey or work for them. When someone is forcing you to work for you, or when you are treated as a property as belonging to someone, you are said to be a slave. Now, learner at home, this was a frequent thing during biblical times, whereby people had slaves. Now, the Israelites were also kept as slaves in Egypt. Moving on, learner at home, we'll look at the rationale. The reason behind this lesson is to help you understand God as the loving, caring, and protective Father He is to His people. This lesson will help you understand God as the loving, caring, and protective Father He is to His people. Moving on, you remember, learner at home, we learned about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in our previous lesson, whereby God destroyed 2 cities with a rain of fire for disobeying Him. In our today's lesson, we are going to learn about the 10 plagues. It is similar to the previous lesson in the sense that they are all about the destruction of life and God's anger and hatred towards people's disobedience. They are all about destruction. If maybe a question may ask you, state the similarities between destruction of Sodom, Gomorrah, and the 10 plagues. They are all about destruction. Let us move on. Lenaitom. What led to the 10 plagues? God's people, the Israelites, Lenaitom, lived as slaves in Egypt for 400 years. Not for months, not 400 months, not for days, but for 400 years, where they were not allowed to worship God but forced to worship idols. Also, Israelites were forced into hard labor, and the Pharaoh ordered that every male firstborn of the Israelites were to be killed by casting into the river. Finally, God sent Moses, who was 8 years old by the time, and his brother Aaron, who was 83 years old, to the Pharaoh, or the Egyptian king, to command him to let the Israelites go. The Pharaoh refused to let them go, and so God decided to punish the Egyptians. He did this by sending 10 plagues, because the Pharaoh refused to let the Egyptians go. Let us move on, Lenaitom. The first plague, now Lenaitom, was water turns to blood. Now, how did this plague occur? Take your rod. God commanded Moses to take his rod and stretch out over a hand over the waters of Egypt, over their rivers, their canals and ponds, and all their pools of water, that they may become blood, both in vessels of wood and vessels of stone. All waters in the land of Egypt turned into blood. Waters of River Nile, the biggest river in Africa, turned into blood. So all fish died, and no one could drink the water because of its smell. The Pharaoh ordered his people to dig well for fresh water, to dig a well, Lenaitom, and refused to let the Israelites go. That is the first plague, Lenaitom. Water turns to blood. You can see the picture here. Here's Moses' rod, and there are some fish here in the water. The water, you can see how it has been turned into blood. The second plague, plague of frogs. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt after being commanded by God, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. The frogs came out, Lenaitom, from the rivers and covered all the land of Egypt. Now, Lenaitom. But still, note, Lenaitom, the Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go. Let us see here. You can see the picture here. There are frogs here all over the houses. Even outside, people are trying to run away from the frogs, as this is the second plague sent by God to try and force the Pharaoh to release the Israelites. But the Pharaoh still refused to let the Israelites go. These frogs were in the land of Egypt, but they did not affect the Israelites, Lenaitom, because the Israelites were living in an area known as Goshen. Let us move on, Lenaitom, to the third plague, a plague of gnats. What are gnats? Gnats are small insects that bite people and animals. Then the Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your rod and strike the dust of the earth, that it may become gnats throughout all the land of Egypt. All the land of Egypt was covered by gnats, was full of gnats. These plagues, Lenaitom, I must highlight, they did not affect the Israelites because the Israelites were worshipping God, but they affected the Egyptians. What happened? Did the Pharaoh agree to let the Israelites go? Let us find out, Lenaitom. Here, the Pharaoh still refused to let the Israelites go and accept God's power. You see, Lenaitom, third plague, the Pharaoh is still stubborn to let the Israelites go. Let us move on to the fourth plague. Okay, you can see here the gnats, the flies here and everything. It's more like flies. It is an insect. It bites. So the Egyptians here, you can see how they are affected by the nets. They are trying to chase them away. The woman here is covering her face. Let us move on. Plague of flies now, the fourth plague. There came great swarms of flies into the house of Pharaoh and into his servants' houses. And in all the land of Egypt, the land was ruined by reason of the flies. Imagine flies all over the houses, all over the area where we are living, Lena at home. These flies did not affect Goshen. I highlighted Goshen was the part of, or was an area or a region where the Israelites lived. It did not affect them, which was where the Israelites were living. The Pharaoh offered to let the Israelites go, but when the flies were gone, he broke his promise and refused again to let Israelites go. You can see how tricky he was. He thought he was clever. So after the floods had gone, he had apologized to Moses, and the flies left, and still again he turned back and refused to let the Israelites go. You can see the flies here. Here is the Pharaoh. Here is Moses. Here is Aaron here. There are flies all over the area, or even inside the palace where the Pharaoh lived. Fifth plague now. Plague of pestilence. All the cattle of Egyptians died, but of the cattle of the people of Israel, no one died. The cattle which belonged to the Egyptians were killed, or they died, but those of the Israelites did not die. God was protecting his people even throughout all of the plagues. Now, but still, the Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go. You can see here, the Egyptians, they are worried. They can see their livestock here. Their livestock has died. You know that livestock is important to us humans. We get clothing, we get food, and everything. Sometimes we even use them to drag hard goods or to transport goods. So animals are also important. Now, the sixth plague, Lenaitom, plague of boils. Plague of boils. So they took ashes from a kiln. What is a kiln, Lenaitom? It is a furnace, or maybe it may be sometimes built like a stove, or built in the form of a furnace shaped, whereby you make a fire underneath and you cook above it. So underneath that kiln, there are usually ashes which have burned out from the fire or from the firewood. So they took the ashes from this kiln and stood. Who took this? Moses took this and stood before Pharaoh. And Moses threw them toward heaven. Toward heaven, Lenaitom, the ashes, and it became boils, breaking out in sores on men and in beast. Men, remember Lenaitom, the Egyptians. Beast, meaning animals which belong to the Egyptians. Boils are painful lumps that form under the skin. The Egyptians and their animals were affected by the boils, which would not heal. What are boils? Lenaitom, if I may come back to Siswati, I may say emathumba. So, still, Pharaoh refused to free the Israelites. Imagine, full of boils all over your body. You cannot even sleep at night or turn over at night. Not only you, but also your animals. But still, the Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go. What a stubborn man, Lenaitom. Now, you can see the picture here. This Egyptian man, all over his body, these reddish blisters here, those are the boils. Not only him, but also his animal here, his donkey here. They are full of boils. This may end up killing you. Now, Lenaitom, let us move on to the seventh plague. Then Moses stretched his hand toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, fire rained down on the earth, and the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. Hail, then I told him, the seventh plague. The Pharaoh is still refusing to let the Israelites go. And God sent the seventh plague, which is hail. In Eswatini, Sangotho. Only in the land of Goshen, where the people of Israelites were, there was no hail. Still, God is protecting his people. The Pharaoh said he was prepared to let the men of Israel go, but not the women and children. He can let everyone go, the men and young boys, but not the women and children. Remember, God does not want to release some and let other people, other Israelites remain in Egypt. But he wants everyone to be free from the slavery because God loves everyone. So this was not a good move by the Pharaoh. And it's more like he was refusing to still let the Israelites go. So Moses refused to take this deal. He said, no, we all want to go for or to be released from the slavery. Then I told him, let us pause here for now so that you can have an ad break. I will come back later with the final plagues.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for that. I'm sure the learner at home needs infomercial so that they can catch up on the lesson. Let's take a quick infomercial. We'll be back after this.
The basic protective measures against the new coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently and thoroughly with soap and water or use alcohol-based hand rub. Maintain social distancing. Maintain at least 1 meter distance between yourself and anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Avoid touching eyes, nose, and mouth. Hands touch many surfaces and can pick viruses. Once contaminated, hands can transfer the virus to your eyes, nose, or mouth. From there, the virus can enter your body and make you sick. Practice respiratory hygiene. Make sure you and the people around you follow good respiratory hygiene. This means covering your mouth and nose with your bent elbow or tissue when you cough or sneeze. Dispose the used tissue immediately. If you have fever, cough, and difficulty breathing, seek medical help early. Stay home if you feel unwell. Follow the directions of your local health authority. Stay informed and follow advice given by your healthcare provider.
Welcome back, grade 7s. We are still learning religious education with Mr. Mangoba Mukonda. So you can continue with the lesson.
Okay, thank you, Lerato. Welcome back, Lenaitom. Before the ad break, we were looking at the 10 plagues that were sent by God to the Egyptians as a form of a way to pressurize the Pharaoh to release the Israelites from the slavery. We ended at plague number 7, which was a plague of hail. Now, we're looking at how this plague affected the Egyptians and how God spared the Israelites from the effect of this plague. Now, the Pharaoh said he was prepared to let the men of Israel go, but not the women and children. The Pharaoh wanted to release some of the Israelites, but keep the women and children. But Moses refused to take this deal and said, this is not what God wants. We are still going to stay here. We want everyone to be freed. No one is going to remain behind. We are all going. So God sent the 8th plague now to try and force the Pharaoh to release the Israelites. Now you can see here the plague of hail. The hail here falling down upon the Egyptians. Animals, vegetation, and everything is being destroyed by this hail. Imagine hail falling non-stop, destroying everything. God here was angry with the Pharaoh. On top of this, God sent an 8th plague as a follow-up from the 7th plague, the plague of locusts. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come upon the land of Egypt, and eat every plant in the land, and all the hail has left. And all the hail has left. God here was trying to finish up everything that remained behind after the plague of hail. So that everything was not left and the Israelites might starve in terms of food, animals, and everything, even their houses and all the likes. So God here was trying to destroy them completely. Now, what is a locust, Lenaitom? A locust is a type of grasshopper that flies in swarms, meaning they go in groups, and is a very destructive to crops and other vegetation. If this animal breaks out, everyone gets confused, everyone gets stressed, because it's very destructive to vegetation, farmers and everything. It is very, very much destructive. Now, let us see it here. You can see here in this picture, it is a grasshopper-like. It eats everything, grass, vegetation, and all the likes. It is more like a grasshopper, and it goes in groups. Where it has moved, it leaves a lot of disruption. So God sent it to make sure that nothing was left behind belonging to the Egyptians. Now, the 9th plague, plague of darkness. So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. Imagine Lena at home. Darkness, 3 days, non-stop. You can get scared. You can get confused. They did not see one another. They did not see, supposed to be not, see one another. Nor did any rise from this place for 3 days. They did not see one another. It was pitch black. You could not even see from a far away distance. And you could not see the next person. You cannot even go outside. So you remain inside the house. But all the people of Israel had light where they dwelt, in the area of Goshen. Darkness in the Egyptian side, light in the Israelite side. Now, after 3 days, the Pharaoh said that the Israelites could go, but he would keep their cattle. How can he do such? The cattle belongs to the Israelites. So the Israelites refused this offer because they needed their livestock to make sacrifices to God. Israelites needed this livestock to make sacrifices to God as a form of appreciation to God for keeping them and freeing them from slavery. So without the cattle or without the livestock, goats, sheep, and everything, they could not offer any thank you to God after he had freed them from the slavery. They also needed food. They also needed to carry heavy loads using those animals. So without the animals, their journey to the promised land wouldn't be a success. So they refused this deal or this offer from the Pharaoh. Now let us look at the final or the 10th plague now. Plague of death of the firstborn sons. God commanded the Israelites to sacrifice a lamb to him on one particular night and paint some of the blood on the door of the house, just on top of the door or in the entrance of the house. Those who did this would be spared from the plague. You take the blood from the lamb or sheep, you smear it above the door entrance. Why? So that you may be spared from the plague. Which plague now? There is the plague of the death of the firstborn sons. The Israelites followed the instruction, but the Egyptians did not. The Israelites followed the instruction because they worshipped God. The Egyptians did not worship God and they didn't know this instruction from God, or this commanded from God. So when the plague of the death of the firstborn sons, which came via the angel of death at night, it didn't spare the Egyptians, but it spared the Israelites, because it knew that the Israelites lived in this house through the smearing of the blood. That night, the firstborn children of the Egyptians died, including the son of the Pharaoh. Finally, the Pharaoh told the Israelites to leave. You can see here, the Pharaoh here is carrying his firstborn son, who was supposed to be an heir to the throne after the elder Pharaoh had died. Here is the queen here. They are all crying, they are all weeping in pain after the death of their son, their firstborn son. So then the Pharaoh decided to let the Israelites go. Now, then I told him, after we have discussed the plagues, let us look at the characters here. God is powerful, loving, caring, and patient. He's a powerful God, loving God, caring, and patient. Pharaoh is evil, selfish, arrogant, proud, thick-headed, and stubborn, because he was keeping the Israelites as slaves for a long period of time. Moses, on the other hand, is obedient, strong, not in terms of physique, muscles and stuff. We mean in terms of emotions, in terms of character. He is brave, confident. Now, the Israelites now, they are obedient to God and respectful to him. The Egyptians, on the other hand, they are thick-headed, stubborn, and obedient to the Pharaoh, who was misleading them. Lessons from this story, Lenaitom. God loves and protects his people. God punishes people who disobey his commandments, like he did to the Egyptians, like he did to the Pharaoh. And God loves and protects his people, like he protected the Israelites throughout the plagues. Not even one plague affected the Israelites. Now, assessment, Lenaitom. Which of the 10 plagues forced Pharaoh to let the Israelites go? That is 1 mark. Number 2. If you were Pharaoh, would you have continued to withhold the Israelites as slaves throughout the 10 plagues? Explain your answer. That is 4 marks. Yes, you support. No, you support. Now let us look at the possible answers, Lenaitom. Question 1. Which of the 10 plagues forced the Pharaoh to let the Israelites go? Lenaitom, the death of the firstborn sons forced the Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. Would you have continued to withhold the Israelites as slaves throughout the 10 plagues? Explain your answer. Lenaitom, this is an evaluative question. Yes, I would have withheld them because they were useful and did much of the hard work. Remember, they were kept as slaves. They did much of their hard work while the Egyptians rested. Yes, I would have withheld them to prove that my sorcerers are powerful too. Sorcerers meaning the witches, the witch doctors, and all the likes. Who did the tricks? The magicians who did the tricks for the Pharaoh. These are my possible answers. You might have a different point of view. It doesn't matter so long as you have been able to support it using a biblical example. Be biblical based. Do not be too general with these answers. However, someone might say no, so that I could save my people from the wrath of the Pharaoh. No, I would have kept the Israelites throughout the 10 plagues, so that I could save my people throughout the 10 plagues. Just spare myself of the headache of the 10 plagues and let them go, the troubles and all the lies, and we continue with our lives. Conclusion, Lenaitom. In this lesson, we have learned that God sent Moses and Aaron to ask Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. God sent 10 plagues to force the Pharaoh to release the Israelites. God, Pharaoh, Moses, Egyptians, and the Israelites all showed different characters in the story. Also learned that God has power over everything. Then I told him, I would like to end here in our today's lesson. May I take back everything back to Lerato.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for today's lesson. It was very interesting, and I am sure that it was beneficial to the learner at home, and I'm sure that they understood the lesson. Up next is my colleague Nogwazi Dlamini, who is going to be presenting the next Form 3 subject, which is science. We'll be back after this.
Hi viewers at home, my name is Professor Shabang. I am the presenter for your favorite health program, Better Health, Better Life. Thank you viewers at home for the calls and the messages, and thank you Eswatini TV for the great platform. Better Health, Better Life Season 4 is coming bigger and better. And now you have a chance to participate by sending a video of your view prior to the next program. On that note, we are appealing to all Eswatini, please stay at home, stop the spread so that we can save lives.
Kumelula ukuthi ligciwane lecorona lisuke kulomunye lingene kulomunye uma sitawusonzelana. Singasita sinciphise kwanza kwalo ngekuthi sikhweshelane. Lokhu kusho ukuthi singachawulani, singathinzani njengokuhagana nje. Tikhweshise ngesigaba lesiyimitha kusuka kulabanye. Kumcoka kakhulu kuhlala uhlobile nekuthi hlobisa uma uke waphumela kubantu. Ngekubambisana sitakumisa kwanza kwaleli gciwane sibe ngulabaphilile. Eswatini sibambisene kulwa nekwanza kweligciwane lecorona.
The basic protective measures against the new coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently and thoroughly with soap and water, or use alcohol-based hand rub. Maintain social distancing. Maintain at least 1 meter distance between yourself and anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Avoid touching eyes, nose, and mouth. Hands touch many surfaces and can pick viruses. Once contaminated, hands can transfer the virus to your eyes, nose, or mouth. From there, the virus can enter your body and make you sick. Practice respiratory hygiene. Make sure you and the people around you follow good respiratory hygiene. This means covering your mouth and nose with your bent elbow or tissue when you cough or sneeze. Dispose the used tissue immediately. If you have fever, cough, and difficulty breathing, seek medical help early. Stay home if you feel unwell. Follow the directions of your local health authority. Stay informed and follow advice given by your healthcare provider.
Learn to cough and sneeze with your pal Grover. Step 1. Realize you are about to sneeze. Step 2. Move your elbow towards your nose and mouth. Step 3. Bless you. 1, 2, 3. Remember to cough and sneeze into your arm or elbow, not your hands.
In the Kingdom of Eswatini, we learn from home because of the COVID-19 pandemic, through social media platforms and television. The government provides us with subjects and teachers of grade 7, Form 3 and Form 5. Watch home study on channel 286 on DSTV or channel 02 on Ginger, or else watch live on Eswatini TV YouTube channel.
letempilo kwesixwayisile ngesifo lesivelile kulamalanga i-coronavirus COVID-19 bagcizelela kakhulu ukuhlendeka kwetandla lokumcoka ukuthi itandla digezwe nawugeza tandla ke bashilo ukuthi digeze lokungenani ama-seconds lang-20 ngemanti lagijimako lanesipho lokunye ke lesixwayise ngawo ukuthi latingalweni lingahlala leligciwane udzinga ukuthi letingalo nato utiwashe ungashintshe itandla kuphela for 20 seconds nalamkhathi singetandla ugeze nakhona litawufa ligciwane kanjalo ngiyanicela ma-loyal viewers gezani itandla nihlale ekhaya nihlale niphephile sitayinqobe i-COVID-19.
Now, from the moment it was announced that there will be no sporting activities due to the ongoing COVID-19, we all felt that. But imagine how much work you can do in your house just using your chair. It could be anything you have in your house. Take a look at this. From my own chair, I'm able to exercise 30 minutes per day, from biceps to triceps to my abs. But what are you waiting for? It is doable, it is possible. I'm able to do all the work. No matter how much time it will take me, I will stay active. Now, if you're a soccer player, an athlete, a gym instructor, anyone who loves exercising, use this time. It is doable in the house, in your own time. Stay safe. Together, we'll win this war.
Imidlalo yonke imisiwe eveni. Hlala ekhaya utivikele kulesifo iCovid-19. Lokumcoka ukuthi uhlale ekhaya. Sitawudlala imidlalo uhulumende sekazivumela.
Kulesikhathi lapho khona umhlaba ula nemkhuhlane iCoronavirus, uhulumende kwakuleli ucele wona eMaswati ukuthi akahlale ekhaya alandzele timiso nemihambo yenhlangano yemhlaba emhlabeni. Kanike ngabe mbukeli ukuthi ngakala ukuthi uphume uye ekhaya ngoba ke uye emsebentini. Hlala ukufake i-face mask. Kanike ngabe kubita ukuthi ukhwehlelela emkhonweni. Sitawubonana mbukeli mayibuya tona temidlalo ngabe sitawulandzela tona tinqumo ta hulumende. Stay home, stay safe.
So lokukhutsatwa kona ke ukuthi hlale ekhaya uhlanzekile ugeze tandla.
Keep fit, stay home.
Ungayi ngaphandle kuyodlala imidlalo.
Hlala ugcoke i-face mask.
Why is hand washing with soap effective against COVID-19? The coronavirus is too small to see, but is covered with little spikes that stick tightly to the natural greases on your skin. It gets on your skin by someone with COVID-19 coughing or sneezing nearby you, or by you touching an unclean surface where the virus can stay active for up to several days. But washing hands thoroughly with soap for 20 seconds is highly effective against the virus. Soap loosens the grip of the virus on the skin and destroys the outer layer of the virus, pulling it apart. This means the virus loses its power to infect people. Washing your hands well with soap means you can destroy or remove the virus and wash it away before it has the chance to infect you or your family. By washing hands with soap and water, people protect themselves, their loved ones, family, and the community. By acting together, we can help stop the spread of coronavirus.
A very warm welcome back to our viewers and a very good afternoon if you have just joined us. My name is Nogwazi Dlamini and you are still tuned in to Eswatini TV and this is Home Study. At this moment we are doing Science 4 from 3 and with me already in the studio is the science teacher Nombumelelo Matebula. Also joining me in the studio is our sign language interpreter Zanele Mota. How are you doing today, Nombumelelo?
I'm fine, Sisi, and you?
I'm good, thank you very much. It's good to see you again. Welcome back to Home Study.
Okay, thank you, Sisi.
I understand today we're doing respiration.
Yes, sister.
What are you expecting your learner to have learned by the end of this lesson?
Okay, by the end of this lesson, we are going to be talking of the objective of the lesson.
Okay.
That you are able to label parts of the respiratory system but there are only certain specific names that you are to label. That is the larynx, the trachea, the bronchi, and the lungs. And you should be able to state the difference between inhaled and exhaled air.
Okay.
Describe the role of lungs, the ribs, the rib cage, and the diaphragm when we are breathing, either breathing in or out. And then describe the role of lungs in removal of carbon dioxide. And lastly, the male parts of the urinary system and state their functions.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Nompumelelo. From threes, I hope you are ready for your lesson. And just to remind you that we are live on YouTube and on Facebook. And if you have any questions, please feel free to text us those questions on our WhatsApp number. Nompumelelo, you may please begin your lesson.
Thank you, guys. You are at home and learners. Now we start our lesson. As we have said, we are learning on the topic respiration and excretion. These are the two characteristics of living things. One, we have the respiration, which is a characteristic of living organism that uses oxygen in the cells to produce energy, which means respiration is there to serve us with what? To provide us with energy. And then excretion, as another characteristic of living things too, is there to serve a purpose of removal of waste materials in the body. But this happens within the body. We're not talking of eliminating, but removal within the body. Both of these are very important. Both of these are very important, as we have said, because from respiration we said we get what? We get energy, which will enable us to do all the activities that the body must do. Like now, I'm talking, I'm standing, because I have energy that is due to respiration. And likewise, this excretion, we have to remove what the body is not in need of. It is toxic. So the poisonous materials that are produced in the body cells must be removed in our systems. And finally, we will eliminate them. So what is this topic mainly telling us? We see in our everyday life, sometimes patients, they are assisted to breathe in hospitals mainly because of breathing difficulty. Even at home, those that are asthmatic, they use spray. Why? When they are now having difficulty in breathing. So, as we have said, it is very important to note that this is not just something which is a fantasy. We are living with this. And then sometimes when we go to the hospital, they ask us to go to the lab so that they can get some urine samples from our body. And from it, they are to check the materials in the urine. What materials? Materials such as the salts and the amount of water. All this because we must know what the problem really is when they are checking us. And then all this happens because of the two systems that we'll be studying today. The first one being the respiratory system, which involves all this. What is this, by the way? We have here the main parts that we need to know are the larynx. Which is this part. We have the larynx on top of the trachea, the tube, which is where air will pass through from outside. Once we inhale, it will go and pass through, and two bronchi, then to the lungs. We have to know the lungs. We have to know the trachea. We need to know the trachea. So, as I have said, the trachea. And also we need to know what the larynx is already indicated. Those are the main parts we need to know for this. What are their functions? All these parts that we have just labeled. We have the larynx as indicated. We have the larynx. The larynx is more or less what we see, especially in males, the voice box, which produces sound. In a way, it manipulates the pitch and volume of the sound produced as I am talking. It might be a soft voice, or we are able to hear because I have the voice box even though you don't see it. It also protects the trachea against food inspiration. Sometimes you choke when maybe liquid or solid try to get into the respiratory system. So what is doing that? It is the job of, or the function of the trachea, of the larynx, sorry. And then we have the trachea, which is the windpipe, commonly known as the windpipe, where now the air passes through from the atmosphere to the whole body after you have inhaled through the nose and the nostrils. Then it's a hollow tube which is connecting this larynx and the bronchi. Bronchi because they are two. Otherwise, each is called the bronchus. So the two are now called the bronchi because they are branching to the two lungs. As we have said, they are branching to the lungs. What are these lungs for? We have said we have the bronchus first. We have the bronchus, which is branching from the trachea to the left and the right lungs. And they act as just extensions of the trachea. And still they are pushing the air forward to the lungs. Then we have the lungs themselves now. This consists of alveoli, some air bags, hence their texture. They feel spongy because they have these bag-like or air sacs, which are called air sacs or alveoli, through which there is going to be what we call gaseous exchange. As already studied on the previous lesson with me on the circulatory system, we have said oxygen needs to get to the cells. Where does this oxygen come from? From the air, where there is going to be now what? Gaseous exchange in the lungs. So the lungs are therefore known as they are known as organs of respiration, where we see the removal of carbon dioxide. And also, we are talking of oxygen now diffusing into the blood, but we are saying removal of carbon dioxide because we are talking of the importance of the lungs in the respiratory system when we are talking of the air we breathe in or out. Then, now we need to talk of the breathing mechanism. When we breathe in or out, we are now going to be referring to a process which we call mechanism of breathing. What happens when you talk of breathing, you are taking in or taking out air into the lungs or out of the lungs. So when you take in, we call it inhaling. When you take out or breathing out, we say you are exhaling. So this happens, why? As a continuity of the supply of oxygen in the body. We need to breathe in and out so that oxygen can finally reach the body cells or tissues. The lungs, the diaphragm, and the rib cage, they play some roles during the mechanism of breathing. They play some roles during the mechanism of breathing. I would like that you viewers at home and learners, we demonstrate this together. I'll only have a video clip this side, but you'll be doing exactly as I have asked you. So what is your role now? We are going to take a deep breath and must note what you are experiencing and also breathe out. So on my side will be watching the video whilst you'll be experimenting yourself. So as you can see there, we have the model where we have the parts we are talking about now of the lungs, the bronchi, and the rib cage, which is solid and rigid. These we now have to use them so that we are demonstrating what happens during the inhaling and exhaling. I'm sure now you are doing it to yourself. Take a deep breath, and when you take a deep breath, as you can see, the diaphragm moving down. What is happening to the lungs inside? They are expanding as air is taken into them. So the diaphragm is flattened, and we are going to see, but the rib cage, in our case, we are not able to see what happens. As you are experimenting, the rib cage is moving. The rib cage is moving forward and upward during inhaling. When you exhale, now, as you can see, the lungs are now contracting and the diaphragm taking back its dome shape, and the air is out of the lungs. So the volume of the lungs is reduced. That means we have what now? Experience the breathing mechanism for you at home as a viewer and learner, and this side demonstrated. Okay, the rib cage, as I have stated, is not able to move in our case there, but in your body, you know it is moving. You can tell what we are talking about. So we can summarize this on the next slide where we talk of the body parts now. As you can see, we have said now we have the rib cage, which is moving up and outward when? During inhaling. And we have what else? The diaphragm is contracting as it moves downwards. As you can see the arrow, it moves downwards, it's flattened. And then the lungs, as you compare the two sizes, this one is expanded as accommodating air into it. So the volume of the lungs is increased. Likewise, when air is breathed out, the rib cage moves backward and down, and then now the diaphragm taking back its dome shape, and the lungs, as you can see, getting smaller in size as they contract when the air is expelled. So this just explains what I've been talking about. When you are inhaling, I expect you to have this as your notes already. We have said during inhaling, the lungs expand as they draw in air, and their volume therefore will increase. The diaphragm moves downwards or is flattened. When it is flattened, it's losing its natural shape. The rib cage on the other hand, is moving up and pushed outward. Then, in exhaling, the opposite are happening. When you are exhaling, we have said the lungs will contract as air is pushed out of the lungs, and therefore their volume will be decreased. The diaphragm, we've said it moves upwards and takes its dome shape, not flattened. Sorry for that. It's not flattened. That one is wrong. It's not flattened. It is taking back its shape, so it is domed. A domed shape. Sorry. A domed shape, not flattened. Then the rib cage is lowered and it moves backward. I would like also that we demonstrate this composition of air, the air that we inhale and the air that we exhale can be compared. What is it that is being compared? Are the components. So when we breathe in, please don't make this mistake, which is commonly made by most of you. You normally say we take in oxygen, and that is wrong, because we have air, we have air. When we have air that is taken in, there is no way that we are sorting out what to take in and not take in. Instead, we breathe in air which contains these amounts. Generally, these are the amounts of the contents of air. About 21% of oxygen gas, about 0.04 of carbon dioxide, and 79% of nitrogen. All this is taken in, and then the small amount of water vapor. Likewise, there is bacteria in the air, but we are only talking of this. And then when now you exhale, we will see on the next video what really happened to cause the difference. Why are we having now 17% of oxygen, 4% of carbon dioxide, and 79% of nitrogen, but there is large amount of water vapor. So in the 79% of nitrogen, there is no change because the nitrogen is never used in the body. But carbon dioxide will be produced because of the reactions that are happening. Like we have said, there is respiration. Since there is that respiration, there is going to be the use of the oxygen in the cell, resulting in the production of the water and the carbon dioxide. Of course, we also talk of the temperature, even though we don't see it here on the table. The temperature in the room is not the same as our body temperature. Obviously, these days, we have seen in the shops, when you enter them, they are always using the thermometer to take our temperatures. So the temperature in the room or in the atmosphere is not the same as the temperature in our bodies. Hence the reason we say when we compare, we must also include also the temperature. Now we are going to watch the video where we'll be comparing the air we are breathing out and the air we breathe in. As you can see there, you just have the test tube with nothing, which means there is just air. There is just air. Now I want to demonstrate by first sucking so that we see what really happens with the water vapor. When we suck, what will happen about to check if there is water vapor produced. I hope it will be shown clearly. There is nothing, as you can see, on the air. Then now we want to suck as a way of breathing in. We'll be breathing in by just sucking. so that we see if there is vapor on the glass tube. Then blow into it. When we blow into it, we are going to compare if there is indeed some vapor, to show that there is more moisture in the air that we breathe out as compared to the air we breathed in. So we are going to check also for the presence of carbon dioxide. As you can see, vapor is formed, which means there is more vapor from the air that I have breathed out by blowing into that glass tube. On the first one, it was dry. It remained dry, which means there was less moisture from the air that we breathed in as compared to the air that we breathed out. Now we are to use lime water to check if carbon dioxide is present when we breathe out, and is it more than what we have said, the air we inhaled. So how am I going to do that? First, I'm going to suck. By sucking, we want to see if inhaled air contains more carbon dioxide. Because the carbon dioxide, when it is more, it has an effect on the lime water. It will have effect on the lime water if there is air. As you can see, there is no change there. As I suck, there is nothing. But blowing into, now we are blowing into, when we blow into the test tube containing lime water, there is now a change noted. It is turning white. As it turns white, it shows that there is more carbon dioxide. In the presence of excess carbon dioxide, lime water turns white, or we normally say milky. But you should note that this is taken as the main test for carbon dioxide. When there is presence of carbon dioxide, we see by the change in the lime water. And when you suck there is nothing that happens as you suck, which means breathing in, allowing air from the atmosphere to get there. There is less carbon dioxide, hence no change noted with our naked eyes. Okay? Therefore, we can say, now conclude why we are saying more carbon dioxide in the exhaled air than in the inhaled. As you can see, the percentages are telling us there is a difference. Like I have said already, I have talked of the temperature. We didn't use the thermometer. We know scientifically we use tools that we have for us to test. We don't assume that it is warm, it is cold. We use thermometer. I did not use the thermometer for today. So now this is the experiment which we conduct, as already I have done. It's just that they were separate test tube. Now let us look at the new process, which is gaseous exchange. Gaseous exchange happens where? We have said it happens in the lungs. What really happens in the lungs? We have said carbon dioxide is removed from the air that we are going to be taking out, is going to be removed. So as you can see the arrows here, they are trying to explain to us that from the air that we are having here, there is air. The air which is from the blood, we have blood that is flowing. And as it is flowing, it has carbon dioxide. Why is it having high content of carbon dioxide? Because it is coming from the body cells or tissues. So it goes to the lungs to be cleaned, where we are going to remove the carbon dioxide. As you can see, carbon dioxide is getting to the alveolus, so that it will be breathed out or exhaled. And the oxygen from the air that we have taken in is now diffusing into the blood, and this now will be taken to where? To the body tissues. So it will be flowing through the body, and by so doing, then we are keeping ourselves in a better position to live. This is all about respiration. Respiration, which is involving inhaling and then using the gas from the inhaled air. So when we describe the respiration, we say it is a breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen, so that it releases energy where? In the living cells. So oxygen from the air we breathe should be continually supplied for respiration to go on smoothly in the cells. Like now we have this COVID-19, which affects this system. People may finally fail to breathe. So if that happens, it means the system now, respiratory system, is failing. Just look at this shortly, the excretion, where we have what? The urinary system, which is made of kidneys, ureters, and the urinary bladder, and the urethra. You will see this in the diagram. What is it used for? So this is the diagram which shows that now in the urinary system we need to remove the unwanted materials which are poisonous, and we have the kidneys doing that job. Then we have the ureter taking what has been extracted, which is normally what we makes urine is the, we have the urea, we have excess water, we have the salts. Now when there are excess, it will be removed. Then we have, as we have said, the function of each on the labeled diagram. I hope we have been able to gather the information for the day on the two systems, that is the urinary system and the excretory system. And then we have also looked at their function, the parts of each of these systems, what are they used for. Hope you have enjoyed the lesson and you have benefited a lot. Thank you, Helena.
Thank you very much, Nompumelelo, for that. What a very interesting lesson that was. We're looking forward to seeing you again for another science lesson.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely day, Nompumelelo. Viewers back at home from 3 specifically, please do not go anywhere. Coming up next is Lerato Mabilisa with Nomfundo Dlamini for religious education 4 from 3. We'll be right back after this.
Basic protective measures against the new coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently and thoroughly with soap and water, or use alcohol-based hand rub. Maintain social distancing. Maintain at least 1 meter distance between yourself and anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Avoid touching eyes, nose, and mouth. Hands touch many surfaces and can pick viruses. Once contaminated, hands can transfer the virus to your eyes, nose, or mouth. From there, the virus can enter your body and make you sick. Practice respiratory hygiene. Make sure you and the people around you follow good respiratory hygiene. This means covering your mouth and nose with your bent elbow or tissue when you cough or sneeze. Dispose the used tissue immediately. If you have fever, cough, and difficulty breathing, seek medical help early. Stay home if you feel unwell. Follow the directions of your local health authority. Stay informed and follow advice given by your healthcare provider.
Kumelula ukuthi ligciwane lecorona lisuke kulomunye lingene kulomunye uma sitawusonzelana. Singasita sinciphise kwanza kwalo ngekuthi sikhweshelane. Lokhu kusho ukuthi singachawulani, singathinzani njengokuhagana nje. Tikhwashise ngesigaba lesiyimitha kusuka kulabanye. Kumcoka kakhulu kuhlala uhlobile nekuthi hlobisa uma uke waphumela kubantu. Ngekubambisana sitakumisa kwanza kwaleli gciwane sibe ngulabaphilile. Eswatini sibambisene kulwa nekwanza kweligciwane le-corona.
Learn to cough and sneeze with your pal Grover. Step 1. Realize you are about to sneeze. Step 2. Move your elbow towards your nose and mouth. Step 3. Bless you. 1, 2, 3. Remember to cough and sneeze into your arm or elbow, not your hands.
In the Kingdom of Eswatini, we learn from home because of the COVID-19 pandemic, through social media platforms and television. The government provides us with subjects and teachers of grade 7, Form 3 and Form 5. Watch home study on channel 286 on DSTV or channel 02 on Ginger, or else watch live on Eswatini TV YouTube channel.
Welcome back, Form 3s. We are on the third subject for today and we are learning religious education with Miss Nomfundo Dlamini. Good afternoon, ma'am. How are you today?
I'm good, Lerato. How are you?
I'm alright. What is today's topic?
Today we are looking at the resurrection of Jesus.
Okay, it sounds very interesting. What would you expect the viewer at home to have learned by the end of the lesson?
How Jesus appeared to different people after his resurrection.
Okay, without further ado, please take the viewer through.
Thank you. Good afternoon, learners. Welcome to our RE lesson. Today we are looking at the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Then we are going to start with the empty tomb. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to relate the story of the empty tomb, outline incidents where Jesus appeared to his disciples after his resurrection. You should be able to explain the significance of Jesus' resurrection to Christians. You should be able to explain the character of Jesus' disciples revealed in the resurrection. And also, you should be able to explain the lessons learned from the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We are looking at Jesus' resurrection. Look at this picture that beautifully summarizes what happened after Christ had risen. You will remember, dear Lena, that we saw Jesus Christ making predictions about his resurrection. Jesus Christ predicted that he will be delivered, the Son of Man will be delivered at the hands of sinful men, be crucified, be killed. But he emphasized that on the third day, he will rise again. So this is what we are going to be looking at today, what really happened on that third day that Jesus talked about. So after Jesus Christ was buried by Joseph of Arimathea, you will remember those women who followed to see Jesus' tomb. So after that, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate to ask for permission to guard Jesus' tomb so that his disciples will not steal his body and claim that he has risen from the dead. And Pilate granted them that permission, so Jesus' tomb was guarded by guards that the chief priests and the Pharisees had hired. But today we are looking at his resurrection. Let's see what happened on that day. So we will remember the last time when we were looking at the burial of Jesus, we said that there were women, Mary Magdalene and other women, who went to Jesus' tomb carrying some spices which they intended to anoint Jesus' body with. Okay. So, but they could not do that exercise because it was already the beginning of Sabbath. Okay, so on the Sabbath they were not supposed to do any work, so they couldn't go to Jesus' tomb. On the third day, which was after the Sabbath, it was then that they went for that exercise to Jesus' tomb. So they went there on the first day of the week, which is Sunday in the Jewish calendar, which is the third day after his death. It was early at dawn, so they went there with the spices that they had prepared to anoint Jesus' body with. Along the way, on their way to the tomb, they were worried about the stone that was in Jesus' tomb. They were worried how they were going to roll the stone. But the stone was rolled. The stone was rolled away from the tomb when they got there. But the body was not there. Jesus' body was not there. These women were perplexed, wondering what had happened to Jesus' body. It is not a normal thing that you will not find a dead person in his or her tomb. So likewise, these women were surprised, were amazed to see such. As they were still perplexed, amazed they saw two men in dazzling apparel who stood by them. They were frightened to see these men. These men we know were angels, were not ordinary human beings, were in dazzling apparel. So they were not normal human beings. These women were frightened to see these men, and they bowed their faces to the ground after realizing that these men standing before them were angels. So they bowed their faces to the ground. The angels asked them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" That was their way of telling these women that Jesus Christ is risen. Why do you seek the living among the dead? They went to a tomb. Tombs where dead bodies are kept. Tombs are found in a place where there are graves, a place of dead people. Why do you seek the living among the dead? Why would you go to graves to look for somebody who is alive? Then they reminded them how Jesus had predicted about his suffering, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. Jesus had said a number of times that the Son of Man will be delivered, be killed, but on the third day rise. And this was the that day. And the women remembered how Jesus Christ had said this to them. So they rushed, went to report this to the apostles. So they rushed to report to the apostles that they did not find Jesus' body and what the angel had said to them. Let's move on now and look at this picture, dear Lena. You can see these women carrying their spices on this basket. They are carrying their spices and they look perplexed in the picture. They look amazed, frightened as well. After seeing these men in dazzling apparel, this angel that told them that Jesus Christ has risen. So this is the tomb which they visited. After rising from the dead, Jesus appeared to his disciples, first to Mary Magdalene and Mary, who had been to his tomb, who had found the empty tomb. So after they found the tomb empty, they rushed to inform the apostles about what they have seen. So along the way, Jesus appeared to them and they were frightened again. Jesus told them not to worry, not to fear anything, but to go to his apostles, to the 11 apostles, and tell them that he was going to meet them in Galilee. So the first people to see Jesus after his resurrection was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. After his appearance to Mary Magdalene, there was this other disciple of Jesus Christ named Cleopas. So he was with his companion on his way to Emmaus. That is where Jesus also appeared to his disciple. That is where Jesus appeared to Cleopas and his companion. Along the way to Emmaus, Jesus appeared to them as a stranger. They could not recognize Jesus Christ as the Messiah. They didn't know that it was Jesus Christ. So he said to he asked them what they were talking about, and he asked them what they were talking about, and they told them, "Who are you? Where are you from? That you don't know the story about Jesus of Nazareth?" And they were. And Jesus Christ did not reveal himself to them at that time. He just went along with them, listening to them up until when they were just about to depart from him. Then they saw that it was Jesus Christ and they begged him to come to join them for supper. After that incident, they also ran back to Jerusalem to the other apostles, to the other apostles, to tell them that they have seen Jesus Christ, only to find that the disciples in Jerusalem also said that Jesus had also appeared to Peter. Jesus then appeared to his disciples who were in a locked room in Jerusalem. Jesus also appeared a week later to his disciples behind locked doors, which tells us that the disciples were living in fear, always lived in closed doors. In his first appearance in Luke 24, verse 36 to 46, one of his disciples was not there, Thomas. And a week later, he appeared again in John 20, verse 24 to 29, and Thomas was present at that time. And Thomas wanted evidence to Jesus to prove that this was indeed him. And Jesus showed him his hands and his feet. Jesus also appeared to 7 of his disciples at the shore of the sea Tiberias. This is in John 21, verse 1 to 14. These disciples had been fishing without catching any fish. So Jesus appeared to them and told them to cast their nets on the right side of the boat, and they caught as many fish as you can imagine. Lastly, Jesus appeared to 11 of his apostles on a mountain in Galilee. Remember, I said that when Jesus met with Mary after the visitation at the tomb, he told Mary to tell his apostles to meet him at Galilee. Then Jesus met his apostles there and he commissioned them to go out and preach the gospel of repentance and forgiveness of sins. Let's move on then now, dear learner, to look at the significance of the resurrection. The resurrection is significant because it confirmed that Jesus was the Messiah. How? He died and rose back to life. Yes, Lerato?
As interesting as the lesson is, ma'am, I think we need to take a break. An infomercial. We'll be right back. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let's take a quick infomercial. We'll be back after this.
Why is hand washing with soap effective against COVID-19? The coronavirus is too small to see, but is covered with little spikes that stick tightly to the natural greases on your skin. It gets on your skin by someone with COVID-19 coughing or sneezing nearby you, or by you touching an unclean surface where the virus can stay active for up to several days. But washing hands thoroughly with soap for 20 seconds is highly effective against the virus. Soap loosens the grip of the virus on the skin and destroys the outer layer of the virus, pulling it apart. This means the virus loses its power to infect people. Washing your hands well with soap means you can destroy or remove the virus and wash it away before it has the chance to infect you or your family. By washing hands with soap and water, people protect themselves, their loved ones, family, and the community. By acting together, we can help stop the spread of coronavirus.
Welcome back from 3s. We are still learning religious education with Miss Nomfundo Dlamini. Ma'am, we have two questions from the viewers, and
yes,
one says, why was Jesus buried in a new tomb? And then the second one says, was it necessary for them to guard Jesus's tomb?
Okay, interesting questions. Yes. We said the other time in our previous lesson that he was buried on a new tomb, one that no one has ever been laid. That was a sign of purity that shows that Jesus Christ was pure. That is what we said that the new tomb symbolized. What was the second question again?
The second question said, was it necessary for them to guard Jesus's tomb?
Oh, okay. I am sure the learner missed the part that it was the Pharisees and the chief priest who guarded the tomb. They had their own reasons. Jesus Christ had said that he will die and rise again. So they wanted to make sure that his disciples do not steal his body and claim that he had risen, because they did not believe that Jesus Christ was the Messiah. They did not believe that he will die and resurrect. So they thought that for his disciples to convince people that he was the Messiah, they will come and steal his body, and in that way they will shout Jesus Christ is risen, and everyone will believe that Jesus was the Messiah.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. There's another question, but I'm not sure if we have time to ask it.
Oh, okay. Let us try to finish this that we have. Then after that, I can take that question.
Okay, no problem.
All right. Let us look at the significance of the resurrection. Dear Lena at home, we are looking at the significance of Jesus' resurrection. I was just saying before the break that it confirmed that Jesus was the Messiah. How? Jesus died and resurrected. That was not what ordinary people did. There were many tombs in Jerusalem at the sepulchre. There were many tombs, but none of them were reported to have risen. Secondly, it confirms that Jesus was the Messiah because Old Testament prophets had prophesied that the Messiah will die and rise again. So this proved that, oh, this man was indeed the Messiah. And then it is also important because it led to the spread of the gospel. It led to the spread of the gospel. How? After his resurrection, Jesus appeared to his apostles and said to them and commissioned them to go out to all nations to preach the gospel of repentance and forgiveness of sins. After his instruction, the disciples or his apostles carried the instructions as given. They went out to all nations preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. Also, it was after his resurrection that they were given the Holy Spirit. Of course, after his ascension, they were given the Holy Spirit to empower them and strengthen them to go out and preach. So in that way, the gospel was spread to other places or nations. Also, Jesus' resurrection showed that Jesus had power over death. It shows that Jesus had power over death. Jesus conquered death. That shows that he was more powerful than death. He defeated death. So it showed his power. Also, it assures Christians that they will rise. It's an assurance to the Christians that they will rise from the dead and live forever. So this gives assurance to Christians that, like Jesus Christ, they are also going to resurrect on the judgment day and have an eternal life, live forever. Jesus resurrected, so they are going to do that like him. And he never died again. So like Jesus Christ, they are also going to get to end or to have eternal life. Let's move on now, dear Lena, and look at the character of the disciples that we see in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We can see that Jesus' disciples were doubtful. They had so many doubts that Jesus had risen. Even when he appeared to some of them, they did not believe that indeed it was Jesus Christ. Take, for example, Thomas. He said, after he heard from the other disciples that Jesus Christ appeared to them, Jesus Christ was with them, he said, I will not believe this until I see his hands. So after Jesus Christ, when Jesus Christ appeared to his disciples for the second time, now Thomas was present. Jesus Christ showed him his hands and his feet. It was only then that Thomas believed. We can also see from the resurrection that the disciples were fearful. They were scared. Jesus found them in a locked room. They are inside the room. They had locked all doors. I am sure even windows were locked. Why would they lock? Because they were scared that as followers of Jesus Christ, they might or they may also be attacked. So they were scared. Thus, they stayed in a locked room. We can also see that his disciples were full of disbelief. It was not easy for these people to believe that Jesus, even though Jesus Christ had been with them for a very long time, Jesus Christ had talked to them about this particular event, about his resurrection, but still they did not believe. So we can tell that these people were full of disbelief. But there are other outstanding characters from some of Jesus's apostles. Take, for instance, Mary Magdalene. We see a different character from this woman. He is faithful. She is faithful. She is faithful. She remained faithful to Jesus Christ even after he had died. Following Jesus Christ to his tomb, taking care of Jesus Christ in his tomb, she had so much faith in Jesus Christ. We can also conclude just from that she was also caring. She went to Jesus' tomb carrying a bowl of spices and perfumes to anoint or to preserve Jesus' body. We can also look at Peter, who also showed a different character from the rest of Jesus' disciples. Peter is responsive. Immediately he learns that Jesus Christ is risen. He ran to see for himself. He ran to see for himself that Christ has risen. He was, and we are told in the Bible that he ran out of joy. He was happy. Then he ran to see for himself. We can also say that Peter had faith. He had faith in Jesus Christ. He never questioned. Take, for instance, when Jesus Christ appeared to them at the seashore at Tiberias, he told them they went fishing. We are told that they'd been fishing for the whole night. And Jesus Christ said they must again cast their nets on the right side of the boat. Peter did not question Jesus Christ. He simply cast down his net. That shows that he had faith in Jesus Christ. Okay. Let us move on now, dear Lena, and look at lessons that can be drawn from the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So Christians learn from this lesson to be committed to their faith. So you learn that you must be committed to your faith, like Mary Magdalene and the other women who showed commitment to their faith in Jesus Christ. Also the disciples, even though they were afraid, even though they were full of fear, but they did show commitment to what they believed in, to Jesus Christ. They continued to unite, meet together to pray in the name of Jesus Christ. They all continued to meet and have teachings of their own, teachings of the gospel, of what Jesus Christ had also taught to them. We also learn that you must be loyal to God, just like Jesus's disciples. They did not say that Jesus is gone now, let us leave this thing, let us leave this gospel of Jesus, let us go back to our roots, we are Jews, let's continue with the teachings of Judaism and forget about what Jesus taught. No, they did not do that. They continued with what Christ had taught to them. And also we learn that it is important to believe and have faith in God, just like Jesus's disciples. They believed in God. That is why they continued with the gospel. They showed faith in God, continued with the gospel, even though they were scared of persecution, but they continued because they had faith in God. Okay. Now that we have looked at Jesus' resurrection, we have looked at the empty tomb, his appearance, let us get to this assessment, this piece of work that I have for you. Today's work is a bit different from the other pieces of work that we have done before. Today I have decided to give you a source-based question that is part of our assessment tool that will be used in the examination. We are expected to answer a source-based question. How do we answer a source-based question? You will have a picture like this one that you see on the screen. You are expected to study as the instruction says above the picture. Study the source below and answer the questions that follow. Study the source below and answer the questions that follow. So study. You have to analyze the picture that you see, because you are going to use it to answer questions. Here is a picture. Then the questions will be based on the picture that you have seen. So you have to tell what is happening in the picture. Like this one that we have here. It shows the empty tomb of Jesus Christ. Remember, he was laid on the tomb, laid on a linen, wrapped on a linen shroud. Here is the linen shroud. Here is the linen shroud in which he was wrapped. And you can see that this must be the stone that had covered the tomb that Jesus Christ was laid. Okay. Then here is the question for you. Remember, you were to study the source and answer the question. Let's look at question A. Give an account of the event in the source. Give an account of the event in the source. You see, the question doesn't tell you what is happening in the source. So it is your responsibility to look at the source carefully and tell what is going on that picture. Okay. Give an account of the event on the source. So you just look at the source and then you write about the event that is taking place on that source. In this one, I have already said that it is the empty tomb. So you are going to give an account of the empty tomb. And then the next question is simple. Explain the significance of the resurrection of Jesus. Let me repeat that. Explain the significance of the resurrection of Jesus. So there is work for you to do today. Having said all that, let me get to the conclusion. To summarize our lesson, let us look at what we have talked about. We have talked about the empty tomb. We have talked about incidents where Jesus appeared to his disciples. We have talked about the significance of Jesus' resurrection. We have talked about the characters of Jesus' disciples revealed in the resurrection. And we also talked about lessons learned from Jesus' resurrection. This marks the end of our lesson.
Thank you.
Yes, Lerato, you can come with that question now.
Okay. The question. Okay, now there's a lot, but I'll just ask
that
one. Jesus showed Thomas his hand and feet. Then what did Thomas see to believe that Jesus had risen from dead?
Oh, okay. Learners will remember that Jesus Christ was nailed on the cross. Jesus Christ was nailed on the cross. Obviously, if I can take a nail you on your hand, what would you see?
The marks.
Of course, that is what Thomas also saw.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, I think that was the last one we're taking.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, learners. Thank you for listening. See you on our next lesson. Okay. Continue staying home, drinking water, and washing hands, of course.
Okay, thank you very much for that reminder. And thank you very much. We hope to see you again next time. Up next is my colleague Nogwazi, who is going to be presenting the next Form 5 subjects, chemistry and physics. Form 5s do not go anywhere. Nogwazi will be back after this.
COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a new coronavirus introduced to humans for the first time. It is spread from person to person, mainly through the droplets produced when an infected person speaks, coughs, or sneezes. These droplets can land in the mouths or noses of people who are nearby. These droplets are too heavy to travel far in the air. They only travel approximately 1 meter and quickly settle on surfaces. This is the reason person-to-person spread is happening mainly between close contacts. The exact time that the virus can survive on surfaces is not yet known. So it is wise to clean surfaces regularly, particularly in the vicinity of people infected with COVID-19. Hands touch many surfaces, which can be contaminated with the virus. You should therefore avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth, since contaminated hands can transfer the virus from the surface to yourself. When coughing or sneezing, cover your mouth and nose with the bend of your elbow or use a disposable tissue. If a tissue is used, discard it immediately into a closed bin. The most effective way to prevent the spread of the new coronavirus is to clean your hands frequently with an alcohol-based hand rub or soap and water. This will eliminate the virus if it is on your hands. Stay healthy and prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Wash, washy, wash, washy, wash, wash your hands. Scrub it while you sing the song. Wash, washy, wash, washy, wash, wash. Rub your hands and fingers and the places in between. Using soap and water makes your hands so clean. Wash your hands. Great job, you're almost done. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now dry.
Wash your hands for 20 seconds, just like Elmo.
Hi viewers at home, my name is Professor Shabang. I am the presenter for your favorite health program, Better Health, Better Life. Thank you viewers at home for the calls and the messages, and thank you Eswatini TV for the great platform. Better Health, Better Life Season 4 is coming bigger and better. And now you have a chance to participate by sending a video of your view prior to the next program. On that note, we are appealing to all Eswatini. Please, stay at home, stop the spread so that we can save lives.
Learn to cough and sneeze with your pal Grover. Step 1. Realize you are about to sneeze. Step 2. Move your elbow towards your nose and mouth. Step 3. Bless you. 1, 2, 3. Remember to cough and sneeze into your arm or elbow, not your hands. Wash hands now. Wash hands now. Wash hands now. Wash hands now. Hand washing is one of the best ways to keep from getting sick and staying healthy all the year long.
In the Kingdom of Eswatini, we learn from home because of the COVID-19 pandemic, through social media platforms and television. The government provides us with subjects and teachers of grade 7, Form 3 and Form 5. Watch home study on channel 286 on DSTV or channel 02 on Ginger, or else watch live on Eswatini TV YouTube channel.
Wash, washy, wash, washy, wash, wash your hands. Scrub it while you sing the song. Wash, washy, wash, washy, wash, wash. Rub your hands and fingers and the places in between. Using soap and water makes your hands so clean. Wash your hands. Great job, you're almost done. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Taking care of yourself is also taking care of others. We're all in this together.
very warm welcome back to our viewers and a very good afternoon if you have just joined us. And my question is, where have you been? We are doing Form 5 chemistry right now with Nomfundo Dlamini. How are you doing today? Sorry, I said Nomfundo. I can see by the look that I was wrong by that. Sorry, it's Notando, actually Notando Dlamini. Sorry about that. Notando, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Nabasi?
I'm good. Very good. I understand today we're doing electrochemical cells, right?
Exactly.
What are you expecting your learner to have learned by the end of this lesson?
Okay. By the end of this lesson, the learner at home should be able to draw and label a simple cell using terms electrode, electrolyte, voltmeter, and the connecting wire. The learner should also be able to state the function of the components I have just listed. The learner at home should also be able to identify the electrodes of the simple cell using the reactions that occur at these electrodes. The learner should also be able to describe how electrical energy is produced from a simple cell, which will have 2 electrodes put in an electrolyte using the reactivity series.
All right, okay, Notando. Thank you very much for that. From 5s, I hope you are ready for your chemistry lesson. And just, of course, to remind you that we are live on YouTube and on Facebook. And if you have any questions, please feel free to use our WhatsApp number. Notando, you may please begin with your lesson.
Thank you so much, Nawazi. So, electrochemical cells. This is what we use every day. So, electrochemical cells, what are they? With me here, I have a slide to show you what electrochemical cells look like. Electrochemical cells, they are self-contained and portable sources of energies. They are used as batteries or fuel cells. So they produce electrical energy to help us use our devices that we use every day. Our cell phones, they help us use our cell phones, our laptops, our watches, and so many devices that use batteries. Okay. So what are electrochemical cells? In definition, an electrochemical cell is a device that uses chemical reactions. It uses chemical reactions to do what? To generate electricity, or it is a device that uses electricity to energize or cause chemical reactions. We say this is a device that uses chemical reactions to generate electricity, or it will use this electricity to energize a chemical reaction. I hope that is clear. Now, we have 2 types of electrochemical cells. One, we can have electrolytic cells. Electrolytic cells, they use an applied source of energy. Electrochemical cells, they use an applied source of energy to produce a chemical reaction. In our last lesson, we were doing electrolysis. So we were using electrolytic cells. We are saying they use an applied source of energy to produce a chemical reaction, like we did in our last lesson in electrolysis. Now, the second type of an electrochemical cell that we have will be the simple cell. This one uses a chemical reaction this time. It uses a chemical reaction. Usually a redox. Hope you remember that redox means reduction and oxidation. This one uses a chemical reaction to produce electricity. It produces electricity from a chemical reaction. So today we will be paying more attention to these simple cells. Okay. So simple cells, they are convenient forms of portable energy since they do not have to be connected to the power supply in order to generate electricity. So for that reason, we can be able to use simple cells in remote areas. They supply electrical energy, as I have said before, to torches, to watches, radios, and cameras. The list goes on and on. So now, what makes up a simple cell? Let us look at the components of a simple cell. A simple cell will be made from two metal bars of different reactivities. That means there will be two different metals with different reactivities, which will be used as electrodes. Now, for example, we can have a copper metal and a zinc metal as electrodes. So what is going to happen here is that the more reactive metal loses electrons more easily. Between the two, the more reactive metal loses electrons easily to form ions in a cell. So it means, remember, losing of electrons is oxidation. So this means that it will be negatively charged since it loses electrons. Now, the least reactive metal, in our example, we have copper and zinc. We have copper and zinc. We have copper and zinc. So the less reactive metal, it gains electrons, which means it will be reduced. Hence, it becomes the cathode. It will be the cathode of the simple cell. Okay. So now, I want you to note something. In this type of cell, which is the simple cell, the negatively charged electrode will be the anode, and the cathode, this time it is positively charged. The negatively charged electrode will be the anode, and the cathode will be positively charged, as opposed to what occurs in electrolytic cells that we use in electrolysis, like in our last lesson. So we were looking at the first component of an electrolytic cell. We were looking at the first component of an electrolytic cell. So how are you going to see that which one is the most reactive metal and which one is the least reactive metal? We make use of the reactivity series, as you can see on this slide. The reactivity series, this is how it looks like. So the more reactive will be the anode, the less reactive will be the cathode. So let us look at the second component of the simple cell. We are going to have an electrolyte. An electrolyte in a simple cell can be an acidic solution, it can be an acidic solution, it can be an alkaline solution, or it can be a salt solution. Remember, a salt is an ionic compound, or even a fruit such as a lemon, such as orange or lemon. Remember, these ones have weak acids. So an electrolyte will be an acid, an alkaline solution, a salt solution, or even weak acids. Okay, the third component rather that we will have will be the connecting wire. This is where electrons will flow. This is the path that the electrons will use to flow from the anode to the cathode, as we will explain a bit later. Then the next component will be a voltmeter. A voltmeter is used to measure the voltage produced in a cell. In the place of a voltmeter, a light bulb can be used. This light bulb will be used in place of the voltmeter to show that current is flowing in this particular cell. Also, a galvanometer can be used. So this one will not take a reading like the voltmeter, but it will just show a deflection. It will move to show that there is current flowing in the cell. Okay, so these are the components shown in this picture. We have a simple cell, the metal bars. We have zinc. We have copper, so the most reactive metal, is zinc here, which means it will be our anode, the negatively charged anode. Then we have the connecting wire here, which I have shown using the arrows. Then we have our voltmeter, which will measure the potential difference in this cell. Then we have our cathode. As you can see, it is positively charged. So these two electrodes, they are different. They have been put in an electrolyte, which is dilute sulfuric acid. As simple as that. So now I have an exercise for you, figure 1.2, where we have a simple cell. This time they have used a galvanometer. So we have magnesium and copper metals submerged into magnesium sulfate solution. The electrolyte they've used this time is a salt. Okay, so here are the questions. In figure 1.2, state the name of the metal that would form the anode. State the name of the metal that would form the anode, and the one that will form the cathode in this cell. And give reasons for your answer. Remember, we said the more reactive metal will form what will be the anode, and the less reactive will form what will be the cathode. So which one is more reactive between copper and magnesium? Which one is more reactive between copper and magnesium? We are going to use our reactivity series. We have magnesium, it's high in the reactivity series. Then we have copper, which is low in the reactivity series. Now, it means our anode will be, you got it right, will be the anode. Our anode will be magnesium, and our cathode will be copper. So second question, state the name of the component B. Component B, let's see what we have. Component B, it's the connecting wire. Then question 3, what charge is the copper metal going to have in this cell? Copper metal, we said our copper is going to be will be the cathode. Remember, we said the cathode, in this case, it is positively charged. Okay. Question 4, another simple cell is made using two different metals. You already know that. Which will be the cathode? Which metal will be the cathode? And which metal will be the anode when the following pairs of metals are used? We're using calcium and zinc. We make use of our reactivity series. We are using calcium and zinc. Calcium. Then we have zinc. Which one is more reactive? Calcium, which means as our anode we are going to have calcium, and as our cathode we are going to have zinc. Then for the second pair we have iron and copper. We have iron and copper. So we make use of the reactivity series. You find out we have iron, then we have copper. So which one will be the anode? The more reactive one, which is iron, will be the cathode. Okay, sorry. What was the question? Yes, iron will be the anode and copper will be the cathode, since it is less reactive. Okay, so let's move on. Now, how does a simple cell produce electricity? Okay, so this is our simple cell. We're having two metals. I've used magnesium and copper as an example, but the concept will apply for all simple cells. So you listen carefully. I will thread nicely so you can understand. So in this one, we're going to have magnesium and copper. So our magnesium is the one that is negatively charged. Remember, it is going to lose electrons. So what is going to happen here is that this magnesium electrode is made up of atoms. The atoms are magnesium atoms. Okay, so what will happen? The magnesium atoms, they will lose electrons. They will lose electrons. You remember how many electrons magnesium has in the outermost shell. So it has 2. So it will lose 2 electrons to form what? To form magnesium ion. I'm writing up here so it can be clearer. So it will form magnesium 2+ ions. Okay, so this will happen for all the atoms that make up this electrode. Now these ions that have been lost by these atoms will move from the electrode to the solution. Okay, so what about these electrons? These electrons, Lena at home, will move through the connecting wire, go through the galvanometer, give a deflection to show that there is electricity, then go through, assume that the switch here is closed, pass through the switch to the copper metal. Now I want you to note that there has been a loss of electrons. Remember we said we write the electrons on the other side of the arrow. So this time there will be 2 electrons like this. So I want you to note that this reaction that occurred at the anode is oxidation, the loss of electrons. Now let's look at what happens to the copper metal. To the copper metal, now we will make use of the ions present in the electrolyte. It is not the actual cathode going through the reduction process. Now we have magnesium sulfate solution, keyword solution, as an electrolyte, which means that the ions present here will be Mg2 plus and SO4 2- ions, along with H plus ions and hydroxide ions. These ones, the ions of the water, and these ones, the ions of magnesium sulfate. Okay, so what is going to happen here? Remember last week we talked about the electrochemical series. We have two cations that stand a chance to go to the cathode. So we said in the electrochemical series, the ones that lie down below in the electrochemical series will be given a preference. So in this case, we are going to have H plus ions going to the cathode. What happens when it gets there? The electrons, remember, they came from the anode. So what will happen is that the H plus will gain electrons. It will gain electrons. It will gain electrons to form an atom. To gain electrons to form an atom. H. Okay, so now H is an H stable. The H atoms will further combine to form H2, which is a gas, which means now we have to balance the electrons. We're going to have 2 electrons and 2 H plus. So gaining of electrons, Lena at home, I hope you still remember it is what it is, reduction. So I hope you note that in this reaction, in this simple cell, there were reactions that occurred. there was oxidation in the anode and there was reduction in the cathode, which caused electrons to move in the circuit. Remember, flow of electrons is what? It is electricity. Okay, so the direction of flow of electrons, Learner at home, you remember that electrons will flow from the negative side of the cell to the positive side. In this case, we have the anode, so it means they will move from the anode to the cathode. In a cell, we are going to have the negative terminal and a positive terminal. When two or more cells are put in series, they form what we call a battery. Okay, so here I want you to pay attention to the reactions that occurred in the anode and the reactions that occurred in the cathode. This is the reaction that occurred in the anode. It's oxidation, loss of electrons. So what you will observe at the end of the experiment is that the magnesium strip will be eroded. Remember, the ions were going into the solution, which means it was being eroded as we were doing the experiment. Okay. Then at the cathode, you will observe bubbles of a colorless gas around here. You'll observe bubbles of what? Of this gas, hydrogen gas. Okay, and the process that occurs there is reduction. Okay. So let's move on. The voltage produced by these cells, they produce current. So the voltage of a cell, learner at home, depends on the position of the metals in the reactivity series. It depends on the position of the metals in the reactivity series. Now, I want you to note this. The further apart the metals are from each other in the reactivity series, the further apart the metals are in the reactivity series, the bigger the potential difference or the voltage will be produced. Okay. For example, the voltage of the cell consisting zinc and copper as the electrodes will have a higher voltage. It will have a higher voltage than the cell that uses iron and copper as its electrode. Okay. So let's assume now we have this cell. This cell is made of magnesium and copper. So you see how these ones are positioned in the reactivity series. So they are far apart from each other, which means the voltage that they will produce, will be very large since they are further apart from each other. Now, let's assume you have another cell which is made from zinc and tin. You see how close these ones are positioned. So the potential difference here will be small, which means they will give a lower voltage. Now, the concept that we have just discussed can be used to design any cell of your choice that you want, depending on how much voltage you want that cell to have. So let us quickly go through this exercise. In this exercise, we have a simple cell. It's made from zinc. It's made from copper as our electrolyte. We have dilute sulfuric acid. Okay, let's see the questions that we have. Question 1, it says the electrolyte used in this simple cell is dilute sulfuric acid. It is dilute sulfuric. Dilute. You know what dilute means. Sulfuric acid. Okay. The question is, name the ions. You name the ions. Name the ions that are present in this electrolyte. So let's see what we have. Means we have H2O, because it's dilute, means the sulfuric acid has been dissolved in water. So what ions are we going to have now? For water, we're going to have hydrogen ions, right? And hydroxide ions. Okay. Now, from sulfuric acid, we'll also have hydrogen ions and sulfate ions. Which of the two metals will form the cathode in this cell? It's zinc and copper. So copper is less reactive, so it will be the cathode. Write the balance of equations for the anode in this reaction. Zinc ion. The zinc metal will lose electrons. Okay. So at the anode, we are going to have oxidation. Which cell will produce higher potential difference between the ones in figure 2.1, the one that have zinc and copper, and which cell between the one that we have in figure 2.1, and a cell which has potassium and silver? And give a reason for your answer. Potassium and silver cell, because the potassium and silver are further apart from each other compared to the zinc and copper. So a greater potential difference will be obtained between the two. Okay, so to conclude our lesson, learner at home, we have discussed that a simple cell is made up of two electrodes of different reactivities submerged in an electrolyte, which can be a salt, an alkaline solution, or a weak acid. We have also drawn and labeled the simple cell. We have also learned how we can be able to identify a cathode and an anode using the reactions that occur as these electrodes. Okay, we have also learned that the voltage produced by a simple cell is dependent on the position of the metal in the reactivity series. And we concluded that the further apart the metals are from each other, the further apart the metals are from each other in the reactivity series, the higher the voltage that will be produced. Okay, so that is that for today. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Notando, for that, and we look forward to seeing you again pretty soon, I hope. Thank you. From Vibes, grab yourself a bit of a snack. We'll be right back with the physics teacher, Mr. Patrick Lamini. Do not go anywhere. We'll be right back after this.
Why is hand washing with soap effective against COVID-19? The coronavirus is too small to see, but is covered with little spikes that stick tightly to the natural greases on your skin. It gets on your skin by someone with COVID-19 coughing or sneezing nearby you, or by you touching an unclean surface where the virus can stay active for up to several days. But washing hands thoroughly with soap for 20 seconds is highly effective against the virus. Soap loosens the grip of the virus on the skin and destroys the outer layer of the virus, pulling it apart. This means the virus loses its power to infect people. Washing your hands well with soap means you can destroy or remove the virus and wash it away before it has the chance to infect you or your family. By washing hands with soap and water, people protect themselves, their loved ones, family, and the community. By acting together, we can help stop the spread of coronavirus.
Litiko letempilo kweselicela baxwayisile ke nesifo lesivelile kulamalanga i-coronavirus COVID-19 bagcizelela kakhulu ke kuhlandeka kwetandla lokumcoka ukuthi itandla digezwe nawugeza tandla ke bashilo ukuthi digeze lokungenani ama-seconds lam-20 ngemanti lagijimako lanesipho lokunye ke lesixwayise ngawo ukuthi latingalweni lingahlala leligciwane udzinga ukuthi letingalo nato utiwashe ungashintsha itandla kuphela for 20 seconds nalamkhathi sinetandla ugeze nakhona litawufa ligciwane kanjalo ngiyanicela ma-loyal viewers gezani itandla nihlale ekhaya nihlale niphephile sitayinqobe i-COVID-19.
Now, from the moment it was announced that there will be no sporting activities due to the ongoing COVID-19, we all felt that. But imagine how much work you can do in your house just using your chair. It could be anything you have in your house. Take a look at this. From my own chair, I'm able to exercise 30 minutes per day, from biceps to triceps to my abs. But what are you waiting for? It is doable, it is possible. I'm able to do all the work. No matter how much time it will take me, I will stay active. Now, if you're a soccer player, an athlete, a gym instructor, anyone who loves exercising, use this time. It is doable in the house, in your own time. Stay safe. Together, we'll win this war.
Imidlalo yonke imisiwe eveni. Hlala ekhaya utivikele kulesifo i-COVID-19. Lokumcoka ukuthi uhlale ekhaya. Sitawudlala imidlalo uhulumende sekazivumela.
Kulesikhathi lapho khona umhlaba ula nemkhuhlane i-coronavirus, uhulumende kwakuleli ucele wona eMaswati ukuthi akahlale ekhaya alandzele timiso nemihambo yenhlangano yemhlaba emhlabeni. Kanike ngabe mbukeli ukuthi ngakala ukuthi uphume uye ekhaya ngoba ke uye emsebentini. Hlala ukufake i-face mask. Kanike ngabe kubita ukuthi ukhwehlelela emkhonweni. Sitawubonana mbukeli mayibuya tona temidlalo ngabe sitawulandzela tona tinqumo ta hulumende. Stay home, stay safe.
So lokukhutsatwa kona ke ukuthi hlale ekhaya uhlanzekile ugeze tandla.
Keep fit, stay home.
Ungayi ngaphandle kuyodlala imidlalo.
Hlala ugcoke i-face mask.
Learn to cough and sneeze with your pal Grover. Step 1. Realize you are about to sneeze. Step 2. Move your elbow towards your nose and mouth. Step 3. Bless you. 1, 2, 3. Remember to cough and sneeze into your arm or elbow, not your hands.
Welcome back to our viewers and a very good afternoon if you have just joined us. My name is Nogwazi Dlamini and we are doing Form 5 Physics right now. If you have just joined us, where have you been? I am with Mr. Patrick Dlamini, who is going to be going through the physics lesson for the Form 5s today. How are you doing today, Mr. Dlamini?
I'm good, Nogwazi. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for asking. I understand we're doing thermal physics today.
Not really.
Not really.
Today's lesson is actually a continuation of the previous lesson. So we're still looking at waves. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. Without wasting any time, sir, you can begin your lesson.
Right. First of all, I would like to welcome the learner and the viewer at home into today's physics lesson. So today, as I've stated earlier, we'll be doing wave properties and sound. Right. Before we proceed, maybe today it's worth mentioning that today's lesson is actually a continuation of our previous physics lesson where we were discussing the very same topic, waves. So in our previous lesson we have covered a lot. First of all, we have covered, in fact we have looked at the main features of waves and we talked about some terms which can be used when describing waves, and then we moved on there and talked about the different types of waves. Whereby we mentioned that there are some waves which we call them transverse waves and other types of waves which we call them longitudinal waves. So, and then another thing we looked at in our previous lesson was the wave equation. And we stated that the wave equation can be actually used for doing some calculations, especially when calculating the velocity of a wave, or maybe the wavelength and the frequency. So the objectives for today's lesson here, the learner should be able to, first of all, to demonstrate the use of water waves to show reflection, and there is refraction and also diffraction. Another objective for today's lesson, so by the end of this lesson you should be able to state that sound waves are longitudinal, and also explain why sound needs a medium for transmission. The next objective here is to state the approximate range of audible frequencies and relate loudness and pitch to amplitude and frequency. The last objective for today's lesson is to describe an experiment to determine the speed of sound in air, and also make necessary calculations there. So without wasting time, we can have a look at the next part of this lesson, whereby we'll be talking about reflection of waves. Then what is this reflection of waves? So reflection refers to the bouncing back of waves at an angle upon striking a surface. So reflection refers to the bouncing back of waves at an angle upon striking a surface there. Then when reflection occurs, we normally say the angle of incidence should be equal to the angle of reflection. And another thing which is worth noting here is that during reflection of waves, there is no change in speed, and there is also no change in wavelength. So we can have a look at this diagram. So in this diagram here, we have these waves, wave fronts, which are incident, and they are striking that surface there. So when they strike that surface, as you can see, they are going to bounce back, and they will travel in that direction indicated by that arrow there. So that bouncing back of the waves upon striking that surface, we call it reflection. So when reflection occurs, as we have stated, the two angles, so if that's our normal there, the two angles, which is that angle of incidence I and that angle of reflection R there, the two angles should always be equal. So that's one law of a reflection that will always remember them. And another thing is about the speed and the wavelength. So during reflection, there is no change in speed and there is no change in wavelength, meaning that the wavelength of the incident wave fronts is the same as the wavelength of the reflected wave fronts. So the spacing between the wave fronts should always be or always look the same when you are drawing or showing reflection. Then we can move on now to look at what we call refraction of waves. Then what is refraction? So refraction here refers to change in speed and direction of waves when they pass from one medium to another of different thickness. So the thickness of the two media must be different for refraction to occur. Then what happens to the speed and wavelength? So the speed and wavelength changes during refraction, but there is no change in frequency, or we can say the frequency here remains constant. So that's what you have to note. So here we have a diagram which illustrates refraction. So in this case, we can see we have two regions. That is deep water here, and the second region is shallow water. Then when the waves are actually crossing from deep water into shallow water, refraction is going to take place there. So meaning that the wave is going to change its speed when it crosses, and also change its wavelength. So what happens to the wavelength of these waves when they cross from deep water into shallow water? So in this case, we can look at that space. So looking at that space on those incident wave fronts and compare it with that space between those refracted wave fronts. So you can see that the wavelength of the refracted wave fronts is actually smaller compared to the wavelength of those incident wave fronts. So we can say that in this case, or what's illustrated in this diagram, we can see that the wavelength is going to decrease. So when the wavelength decreases, even the speed of the waves are going to actually decrease there. So when drawing here, you should always ensure that now your wavelength, that difference in wavelength is actually indicated in your diagram. So the opposite will happen when the wave crosses from shallow water to deep water, meaning that now the speed, we expect the speed to increase and also the wavelength to increase. Always the frequency of the waves remains constant. The next thing we're going to discuss now is what we call diffraction. So what is this diffraction of waves? So we can say diffraction refers to the spreading of waves around corners of obstacles. The spreading of waves around corners of obstacles. For example, when waves pass through a gap. So there are two types of gaps we're going to discuss here. So we can have a small gap and we can also have a large gap. So what happens to the waves when they pass through a small gap? So what we can say here, when the waves pass through a small gap, more diffraction occurs and the waves emerge, they emerge on the other side as circular waves. So that's illustrated in this diagram down here. So that diagram illustrates these waves passing through that small gap there. So the waves are actually passing through that small gap. And what we are saying is that on the other side, they emerge as circular waves when they go through that small gap. Again, a small gap should be almost equal to the wavelength, that wavelength of the incident wave front. So that's how we can easily see that this gap is actually small. So comparing that gap with the wavelength, so you can see that that gap is almost the same size as that wavelength. So always when they pass through a small gap, the waves are diffracted such that on the other side they emerge as circular waves. Then what happens when they pass through a large gap? That is a gap which is much bigger than the wavelength of the incident wave fronts. So when the waves pass through a large gap, there is less diffraction which is observed. So that's indicated in the second diagram. So looking at the gap here between these two obstacles, so that gap is very large. So in this case, there is less diffraction, meaning that looking at the waves on the other side of the gap, you can see that the waves are almost straight and they are slightly curved at their edges. Yeah, so when a diffraction occurs in a large gap, the waves are almost straight with those slight or they are slightly curved around their edges there. So that's what happens when the waves pass through a large gap. Then now we can look at a question here. So there is this question which we're going to look at. The question is as follows. The figure here shows water waves. So there are water waves which are approaching a concrete barrier. So there's that concrete barrier which has a small gap. So you have to note the size of the gap. In this case, the gap is small. So that's the diagram which actually shows, so that diagram shows these water waves approaching that gap. Then now, on the figure, part A there, on the figure you draw three wave fronts to show the wave after it has passed through the gap. So we have to draw three wave fronts to show the waves after it has passed through the gap. Right. So in this case, maybe we can go to part B before we can come back and look at the answers. So part B there, it's name the effect that is observed. Name the effect that is observed. Then part C, mark on the figure the wavelength of the waves before they pass through the gap and label it lambda there. And the last question, the gap is actually increased to twice the wavelength of the waves. Then we have to describe the effect this will have on the waves after passing through the gap. That's our question. So now looking at part A here. So on the figure, you have to draw 3 wave fronts to show the wave after it has passed through the gap. Again, it's a small gap. So if you recall what we did in the previous session here, actually, if we look at the previous diagram, so here, looking at the waves when they pass through a small gap, we can see that they emerge as those circular ripples on the other side. So now we can actually draw those 3 wave fronts here to show those circular waves on the other side. So when we draw here, so you can draw the first ripple here, it should be circular. So in this case, that will be our first ripple. Then maybe the next one should appear there, and then the third one should be somewhere there. So those ripples are actually circular as shown there. Again, what's important there is the spacing between the ripples. So the spacing between these wave fronts should be the same, because during refraction there is no change in wavelength. So the space between those incident wave fronts should be the same as the space between those diffracted wave fronts, because there is no change in wavelength. So when drawing your diagram there, the space should be the same, and it's better when using a compass so that we can actually ensure that that space is the same. Then we name the effect which is observed. So the effect which is observed, we call it diffraction. So that's diffraction there, diffraction. So that's the effect. So we call it diffraction. So now, then part C, we have to mark and label the wavelength of the incident wave front. So our wavelength here, so we have to show that wavelength by an arrow between 2 incident wave fronts. So that's our wavelength, and you label that distance lambda there. Then the last part of the question, given that the gap is actually increased to twice the wavelength of these waves, describe the effect that will be observed after the waves have passed through the gap. So if now we have a large gap, then what's going to happen? So if you recall very well from the previous diagram, so you can see that's what it's observed there. So that's what's observed when this gap is actually increased. So in this case, you have to state that the waves are going to be almost straight waves, but slightly curved at their edges. So there is less diffraction. So your answer there, the waves should be straight and slightly curved at their edges because there is less diffraction. Now we can proceed and look at what we call sound waves. So what are these sound waves, or how are sound waves produced? So what we can say here, we can say that sound waves are actually produced by vibrating sources. So sound waves are produced by vibrating sources. For instance, we can have a loudspeaker, we can have a guitar string. So all those produce sound waves. You can think of many more other examples of these materials which vibrate and produce sound waves. Then of interest to us here is that how sound travels from the source of that wave to the surroundings or to our ears. So what really happens to the particles of the media as sound passes through in order to reach the next person or our ears then. So we can look at that example of a loudspeaker. Maybe you are using that loudspeaker for playing your music. Then what really happens there? So now we can consider that loudspeaker. So we can say as a loudspeaker cone vibrates, it moves forward and backwards. So looking at that cone there, as you are playing your music there, the cone of that loudspeaker will be moving forward and backwards as it vibrates. So this vibration then, or that backward and forward movement, will cause squashes, so which squashes and stretches the air in front. So the air in front of that loudspeaker will be actually stretched and squashed there. When the cone moves forward, it squashes the air or compresses the air, and when the cone moves backwards, it actually stretches the air there. As a result, we'll have a series of compressions and what we call rarefactions. So by compressions, we mean those squashes or the air particles which are actually packed there. And then by the rarefactions, we mean the stretches there, where the air particles are actually stretched there. So a series of these compressions and rarefactions then travels through air, and these are sound waves. So these are sound waves. So we have a diagram here which actually illustrates what really happens when actually sound moves from that loudspeaker there to that ear there. So in this case, we are saying when the cone, because the cone will be vibrating by moving forward, and then it will also move backwards. So when the cone moves forward there, so it squashes the air there. In that region, you can see that the air particles are actually closely packed there. So that is actually caused by that cone moving forward. And then after a short period of time, you will see that cone moving backwards. As a result, you can see the particles there will be actually stretched out. So each particle of the air there is going to vibrate forward and backwards as the sound wave actually passes through that media there. Yes, Nogwazi, is anything?
No, so you may continue with your lesson. You just have a couple of minutes left.
All right. Then now, so what we are saying here, there are these squashes and stretches of air, which we call these squashes, we call them compressions. These are our compressions. And these stretches here, we call them rarefactions. So basically, sound waves will move as those compressions and rarefactions. So each compression is followed by a rarefaction. As a result, the sound is actually transmitted from the source all the way to our ears or to the next person there. Maybe another thing we have to note about sound is that range there. So we normally say human ears can hear frequencies between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz. And these range from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. We call them audible frequencies. So you should always remember this range, that 20-20 range there, from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. That's the range of the sound waves which can be actually be detected by our ears, meaning that any wave of maybe a frequency which is less than 20 hertz, that cannot be, that sound wave cannot be heard by our ears. Or if it's actually above that 20 kilohertz here, that sound wave can actually damage our eardrums. So that's the range of audible frequencies. Again, 20,000 kilohertz, sometimes, in fact, 20 kilohertz, sometimes we can write that as 20,000. So that's 20,000 hertz there. So that's 20,000 hertz. So the 20 kilohertz is 20,000 hertz. Then now we can look at properties of sound waves. So the first property we're going to discuss here, one thing you have to note is that sound waves are longitudinal. Remember that we talked about two types of waves, transverse and longitudinal. So sound waves are longitudinal as they have compressions and rarefactions. And the particles of the media here always oscillate backwards and forward. So you should always recall that sound waves are longitudinal waves. Another thing you have to recall here is that sound waves need a medium. So sound waves need a medium to travel through as it moves due to oscillation of particles. If there is no medium, or there are no particles around, or you are in a vacuum, then sound cannot travel in a vacuum, because there must be vibration of particles for sound to be transmitted from one point to another. So sound cannot travel through a vacuum. Then another thing here is that now if we look at the amplitude, how does the amplitude actually affect loudness of a sound wave? So when we say here, we can say the higher the amplitude of a sound wave, the louder the sound produced, meaning that increasing the amplitude of that sound wave, that increases the loudness of the sound produced. And on another hand, here we can look at frequency there. Then how does a frequency affect what we call the pitch of a sound wave? So we can say the higher the frequency of a sound wave, the higher the pitch of the sound produced. So increasing the frequency of a sound wave also increases the pitch of that sound wave, meaning that when you decrease the frequency, you are decreasing the pitch there. Remember that frequency, that's the number of oscillations produced per second there. So if you are increasing that frequency, you are increasing the pitch of the sound wave, which is actually produced. Then the last property there, it's what we call a speed of sound in different media. So we can say here sound travel at different speeds in different media. For instance, here we have solids, liquids, and gases. In this table here, the approximate speed of sound in solids it's 5,000 meters per second. In liquids, it's 1,400 meters per second. And then in gases, it's around 330 meters per second. So you can see in this table that solids are good transmitters of sound compared to liquids and gases there. Then now we can look at reflection of sound and what we call echoes. So we can say hard surfaces such as walls can reflect sound to produce what we call echoes. Then what is an echo? So we can say an echo is a reflected sound wave heard just after the original sound wave. So that's an echo. It's a reflected sound wave that is heard just after the original sound wave. For instance, when you are in a room that is empty, normally when you shout within that room, so after you have shouted, you can actually hear some noise. So that noise you hear after you have just shouted in that empty room, that's what we call an echo there. So it's that reflected sound wave that is produced after the original sound. Then now, what's the use of these echoes? So echoes can be used in experiments to find the value of speed of sound in air there. So in order to determine the value of speed of sound in air, remember we have said it's 330 meters per second. So in order to determine that value, we can use echoes. Then how can one perform the experiment to determine the speed of sound in air? So here you might, in doing this experiment, you cannot just do it alone. Maybe you can have your friend there to assist you in operating a stopwatch, because we have to time some claps here. So one can stand, when doing this experiment, one can stand about 100 meters from a large wall and clap hands. And in this case, the clapping is done such that the next clap coincides with an echo of the previous clap. And in this case, we have to time at least 10 claps in order for us to increase the accuracy of the results which is actually obtained. So that's how you can do that experiment in order to determine the speed of sound in air. Then now that brings us to the end of the lesson. Before we can now look at our lesson summary, what we have actually covered in this lesson. So one thing we've covered under waves that we describe or we try to define a wave as a transfer of energy from one point to another without transfer of matter. Another thing, we differentiated between transverse and longitudinal waves there. And we also considered some terms which can be used here to describe a wave. Those are the terms: amplitude, frequency, wavelength, speed. And then we looked at the wave equation, and we said that equation can be used to calculate the speed of a wave. And we also observed a reflection, or we looked at, or we demonstrated reflection, refraction, and diffraction of waves. And another thing we have done here, we have stated that sound waves are longitudinal, and we also considered that range of audible frequencies. And we said sound cannot travel through a vacuum, and we said pitch of a sound and the loudness is actually affected by the amplitude, and the pitch is affected by the frequency. And the last thing we mentioned is that an echo is actually a reflected sound wave that is actually heard just after the original sound. So that's all we had for today's lesson. So actually that brings us to the end of our physics lesson today. I hope you did enjoy this lesson. Yes, until we meet again. That's all for today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dlamini. We're hoping actually to see you again, like you said, till we meet again.
Definitely, there's still more interesting physics. We're going to come here and discuss.
All right, thank you very much. Viewers, please do not go anywhere. Lerato and myself will be right back after this.
In the kingdom of home because of the COVID-19 pandemic, through social media platforms and television. The government provides us with subjects and teachers of grade 7, Form 3 and Form 5. Watch home study on channel 286 on DSTV or channel 02 on Ginger, or else watch live on Eswatini TV YouTube channel.
Kumelula ukuthi ligciwane lecorona lisuke kulomunye lingene kulomunye uma sitawusonzelana. Singasita sinciphise kuanza kwalo ngekuthi sikhweshelane. Lokhu kusho ukuthi singachawulani, singathinzani njengokuhagana nje. Tikhweshise ngesigaba lesiyimitha kusuka kulabanye. Kumcoka kakhulu kuhlala uhlobile nekuthi hlobisa uma uke waphumela kubantu. Ngekubambisana sitakumisa kwanza kwaleli gciwane sibe ngulabaphilile. Eswatini sibambisene kulwa nekwanza kweligciwane lecorona.
Welcome back to our viewers. Unfortunately, that was the last lesson for the day. We shall see you again tomorrow. Lerato, I see you're acquainting yourself very well with the machine there. What's going on?
Well, the machine seems very interesting. I didn't know until today. For sure, that's why the teachers are always using it. It's very interesting.
Well, they have to use it. All right. Just to remind you viewers back at home, I have actually tomorrow's timetable, and it looks like this: grade 7s, Form 3s and Form 5s. I hope that you will be ready for tomorrow's lessons. This is tomorrow's timetable. Starting at 2 p.m. until 2:30 p.m. we have science for the grade 7s. Then from 2:30 p.m. until 3:08 p.m. we have English language for the Form 3s. Then from 3:08 p.m. until 3:45 p.m. we have mathematics for the Form 3s. From 3:45 p.m. until 4:25 p.m. we have mathematics for the Form 5s. Then the last lesson for the day, we have Siswati for the Form 5s from 4:25 p.m. until 5 p.m. Lerato, please remind our viewers about the social media platforms.
We have YouTube and Facebook where we are live from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And you can also catch any episodes that you have missed on our YouTube page.
Yes, and just another reminder that we do have a WhatsApp number that you can feel free to use to ask any questions that you might have. And speaking of YouTube, you can subscribe on our page as well just to get notifications of when we are live. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Stay safe, stay at home actually, and have a lovely evening. Bye. Bye.